Hello, Happy New Year. We are the Jigsaw Guys, helping you put the pieces together. My name's Peter Phelps.
And I'm Lloyd.
And we are both psychotherapists. I'm from London in the UK. Whereabouts are you from, Nick?
Yeah, so I'm based in Calgary, Alberta in Canada, but I also cover London in the UK where I'm from, Pete.
Okay, and I should also mention that I see people internationally via the internet. I've got clients at the moment in Italy, Belgium, and Bangladesh. And I've also seen people from as far afield as Melbourne in Australia, which is probably a record for the longest distance therapy session, I should think. So, first of all, I think we should begin by explaining what we mean by the term psychotherapy. The definition that I've always liked is that it is treating psychological and emotional problems using psychological principles. So, is there anything that you want to add to that, Nick?
Yeah, Pete. I think when we look at encompassing what it's about in layman's terms for the general public, if you come in with presenting issues such as insomnia, addiction, maybe overspending, overeating, anger issues even, we seek to go beneath the surface and to look at the core as to why those presenting issues are coming up. What do they mean, and what are they a surface issue for?
Right. So for an issue such as perhaps insomnia or gambling or some other addiction, that's just a presenting issue. And what we're saying is that there are underlying problems there, that there are emotional or psychological issues either in the present day or maybe going back years, maybe going back to childhood, that are actually driving those behaviors, those issues in the present day.
Yeah, so when we look at therapy as a whole, psychotherapy, psychology, which is what we're involved in, we look at taking those emotional issues and working with them. So what we see is that people come in with something in particular and they say, I can't cope with this, the way in which this is controlling my life, or the way it makes me feel anymore. And there are a lot of things going on at play. It's not just the issue that they have, but it's the rhetoric that we use as we're raising people from children to adults. It's the way in which we treat each other. It is the burden we place on each other and the societal norms that kind of feed into those emotional issues. They all come to the surface, and that's what we look at working with, isn't it?
That's absolutely right. Yeah. And I deal with quite a wide range of issues myself, as I know that you do. My specialist areas are relationship issues, addictions, anxiety disorders of one sort or another. And I know that you've got some specialist areas yourself, haven't you, Nick?
Yeah, I certainly work with anxiety, Pete. Anxiety, abandonment issues, usually from childhood, and within the LGBT community I work as well. So with anxiety, I work across the board, and that covers LGBT or non-LGBT, various cultures. And but within the LGBT community, I work with both sexuality issues and trans issues, but also with the families and friends of those people as well.
Yes, because that's one of the main impacts of these issues, isn't it? And we see that across the board, that it's not only the person's issues themselves, but it's how much people buy into what other people think and what other people say, or what that person fears other people might say. Now, I've heard a lot of talk about an issue in the LGBT community that's called dysphoria. So I know that you deal with that as one of your specialist areas. Can you tell me what that means?
Yeah, so when you grow up, you're assigned a sex at birth. We all are. And you may grow up with, it's almost as if it's it's a real kind of dislike of the body that you have. Some people call me up and say, I'm suicidal because I do not want these body parts. They don't fit with the sex that I am. The biological sex that I was born, sex that I am, kind of misaligned. And there's a lot of argument about that. Well, you can't change your sex, you can't do this, and you shouldn't do that. We need to kind of open discussion around that. I don't necessarily advocate for medical transitioning. That can be done to somewhat alleviate the dysphoria, or it can alleviate it altogether. But what I advocate for is a safe space for people to open up and say, am I trans, or am I just juggling with the gender norms and societal pressures that make me feel as if I have to be feminine or masculine to fit my sex?
Okay, so in the case of someone who is born biologically male, but identifies as female, or vice versa, that's something that needs a lot of exploration before you go down the road of transitioning, which can involve surgery, can also involve hormone treatment, in order to change biologically into the gender, or as close a fit to the gender that you actually feel you are on the inside. And that's not a foregone conclusion, is it?
No. So when we say gender is fluid. It can be the fashion of the day, the ideas of the time. We look back in history, perhaps look at high heels. Somewhat they were invented for butchers to be able to stand for men who were smaller. Today, they're for women. And this is where we see a lot of differences. Today's thinking and perhaps tomorrow's thinking will equally be very different. And instead of just buying into one set of feelings, beliefs, emotions, opinions about things, we need to say that although we cannot necessarily change the DNA or the biology that we are, we can choose to medically transition, or to transition without medical intervention. And there's a lot of misinformation about that, a lot of misinformation about hormone blockers. There's a huge debate going on at the moment. And it's really difficult for people to understand. If you are not trans, or not investigating whether or not you are trans, it's very difficult because people have their own opinions about things. But we need to kind of look in that area. We need to kind of look more factually at the information. But outside of that medical arena, we need to encourage more open talk, less, shaming, and more to say, look, if you're a guy and you feel this way, that's okay. If you're a girl and you feel this way, that's okay. And if you don't identify that way, that's also okay. It's not the same as saying, yesterday, I was British, today I identify as Canadian. It's not the same at all. This is a real physical dislike of the body, and it causes some horrific symptoms that need psychological treatment and sometimes medical intervention.
Right. Okay. So just to clarify, you're not exclusively an LGBT stroke sort of trans therapist. You will deal and help with people with emotional and psychological issues across the board. And that's something that we've seen an awful lot of in the last year, isn't it? Obviously, with the coronavirus pandemic, the world is a very different place now from how it was a year ago, isn't it? Where where this pandemic has rolled across the world, and countries have gone into lockdown, and people have lost their jobs, they've lost their businesses, We've been working from home. People have been cooped up with their families or with partners, which has put a lot of strain on relationships. People have been isolated, haven't they? If people live alone, if maybe they're retired, or if they live in just a one-bedroom flat or apartment, and going from having a job where you go to work and maybe your social life revolves around work, to then going to work means getting out of bed and opening up your laptop. That's an enormous change to adapt to, and some people have found it really, really hard, really, really difficult. I'm sure that you've seen that, many examples of that, Nick.
Yeah, a lot of the calls that I've had seem to be surrounding issues with males, and that is the suicide rate is going up, it's climbing. What we do in society is, as I was saying before, Pete, we shame people about their emotions. If you feel this way, if you are this, if you are that label, you should be ashamed. You shouldn't speak to anybody about it. You shouldn't burden anyone. You need to man up, suck it up, deal with it. And whilst we do need to do that, if we use those words, which many people do use today, a lot of people say to each other, just suck it up, man up. We meet the client where they're at. So if you come into me and say, look, I just have to man up, I'm going to say to you, manning up can also mean dealing with your emotions. It doesn't have to mean locking them away. But people physically are locked away in their homes. If they're not going outdoors to work, they're incredibly stressed. So they're sat with many of their emotions and thoughts and feelings that they didn't have to address before. And, as we know, Pete, when you're sat down with time to think, this is the time where the things that you haven't had to think about for a long time, or you found ways to squash by going out and keeping yourself busy, they're starting to come to the forefront. And we're seeing relationships break up. We're seeing people get into relationships to deal with emotions they don't want to deal with, or because they're lonely. We're seeing people with OCD get worse with their symptoms. We're seeing isolation increase in different ways. So perhaps before you didn't really go out that much anyway, but you had the choice to, and now you don't.
Yeah.
And lots of people are away from their friends and family as well. So they may have had a bit of a support network where they could at least alleviate some of their feelings by enjoying themselves and getting out. And now they can't do that.
Absolutely. So we've got all of these problems all across the world, and really not enough emotional and psychological support in place to help and to deal with all of these issues. And that's why we're here, isn't it? That's why we are going to be on the Quarantine Network as a emotional and psychological lifeline, a place where you can talk about the issues that you want to talk about. And we want to hear from the other people on the Quarantine Network. We want to hear from you with your problems, with your issues, whatever they may be. There are not going to be any real taboo subjects. You can say whatever you want, and you can ask whatever you want, and you can do that via the comments at the beneath this video, or you can direct message us. Our details will be coming up at the end with anything that you want to discuss, with anything that you want to talk about. So is there anything that you want to add to that, Nick?
I think, Pete, you've covered it really. What we want to do is help people to move away from the stigma of having mental health issues and say, this is your emotional health. And if you broke your leg, you go to A&E, and everybody would say, oh, that's terrible. You've broken your leg. Let me help. What we do with our emotional health is we say, you're a burden. Sit there and deal with it. Don't come to me. What we do with children is say, don't be silly, or your brother didn't do that, so why are you doing that? Why are you saying this? Why are you behaving this way? And we shame the emotions of young people. So as they grow up, what we see, Pete, is the adults that they end up being, and many people feel ashamed about the way they feel about things, or they put on a front. You know, when people step out the door, what shall I wear? How many of us wear things? We put things on and say, I really enjoy that. I really love what I'm wearing. But we're also signaling to other people, you know, whether or not we look good, whether or not we're attractive. And it's the same goes for the people we date, the things we do, the choices we make in life. And we want to say to people, listen, your emotional health matters. What would you do if you were sat without the influence of the people around you? That is your friends and family. Because we often surround ourselves with people that would support and not challenge us as human beings. And what we're here to do, Pete, is to say, look, we're here to help you to understand that it's okay to be challenged. It's okay to take responsibility for your emotions. It's okay to feel everything that you do. And it's okay if you want to sit and feel all the feels. That's the service we want to provide, the help we want to give people. You don't have to do it alone. It's you know, it's not something you have to sit by yourself and say, I'm hurting and therefore I should just pretend it doesn't exist and I'll find another way to deal with it. I'll drink, I'll ignore my emotions, I'll squash them, I'll overeat. And we're going to encourage people to drop comments in the comments box below, or to contact us via social media, Pete.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So that's what we want you to do. Whatever issues you've got, whatever problems you've got, whether it's emotional, whether it's relationships, whether it's just thoughts and views on the world as a whole or your own situation, drop them in the box below, direct message us, and we will see you again very soon on the Quarantine Network.
Yeah, we certainly will. And remember, folks, that everything is confidential. Any good therapist will be going to therapy themselves on a regular basis. And many of us have been through the trials and tribulations of life and have experience in many areas, not just in theory, but in actual practice and experience in life as well. So don't feel embarrassed. And I know that's easier said than done, but if there's anything personal you want to ask us, you can DM us. Otherwise, just contact us in the comments below and let us know what you want to talk about.
Okay, so you take care, Nick. I'll see you again soon.
You too, Pete. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.